So let's talk about that. This will be our the rest of today, and then the next time we'll be going over how to start a practice. This is a long one. All right, we're just gonna run it like this. I'm not gonna do it with the animations. You guys can live with through it, okay? All right, are we ready to get going? Cool. Alrighty. So, as far as what we're going to talk about here is how to start a practice, or how I stopped learning. I learned to stop worrying and embrace uncertainty because it's the only truth. I do have to put this in here. I do have a couple things on here. I am not a tax advisor or a lawyer or anything like that. So you are going to need to get professionals to help you with that. And let's just get going into it. So Hatton, right as I started, had this quote, which is, "You spent the last 4 years learning what to learn. I have 2 years to teach you how to learn." And so what I'm trying to do is give you kind of a compass of how to open a practice, because I will tell you everything that I did, but it may not work for you, and you may be in a completely different situation. But as long as you have those tools and kind of the key principles, you're going to be able to figure this out. One thing it took me a long time to realize is every problem is a gift. I know that's weird to say, but every time you've had an upset patient, you failed at something, it's best to take that as a gift, because you can learn from it and then know that if it comes back, you know how to treat it. And what I'm going to tell you is you're going to have a lot of problems and a lot of frustrations when you try to open a practice. Even if you're buying a practice, when you guys go into practice, it's going to be harder than you think. It's going to be very fun and very rewarding, but it's going to be hard. When I was at Frank Spears' lecture a few weeks ago before I went to Chicago, this is kind of how we think it's going to be. You start in residency and you're down here, and then by graduation you're up here, and you get up to the real world and you're here, and then you get some experience and you're up here, and then you start up and you're up here, and it's just this constant growth curve, and it's great. And that's not how it happens. This is what actually happens. Remember when you guys started residency? I mean, if you're like me, I thought I kind of knew what I was doing about root canals, and then I got hit super hard by no, you don't. So it drops down. And then you start to learn, you do well, and you start to graduate, and then you get out to the real world, and it's so much harder. The cases are complex, they're calcified, they take longer, the patients are annoying. And then you start to learn it, and you get this experience, and you're like, "Oh, I think I'm finally starting to get the hang of it." And then you decide to do a startup, and you're like, "Dear God, I know nothing." The good news is, if you take the average of these, it is still a line moving up. Just realize it's going to get a little bit harder at the beginning than you think. So I wanted to go over a few of the options you guys have, because this will come into play later as far as what you can do when you get out. So government public health, really the pros of here is it's reliable. The cons is everything else. There's no pressure. It's boring. You don't get any tax benefits. You're going to have lower income. But for some people, they really like it. And so I texted my friend Claire, who I think, actually you guys didn't meet her there. But this was kind of her, downsides of the of working in the Army, 4 a.m. drug tests, living in, the Middle East, war. She put the ugly outfits. And she's now in private practice, and she golfs pretty much every single day down in Arizona. So she's very happy that she left the Army. You can also go corporate. I believe, is 2 out of 3 of you are going corporate, right?
I'm still, I'm probably not going to figure out what I'm doing for another few months.
And that's fine. That's fine. You've gone to school for a long time. Go enjoy a month off. So pros of this is you are going to be super high volume. You will see patients. You're going to learn efficiency. And generally, you're going to have a built-in referral base from the other general dentists who are also corporate, because they have to refer to you. That's actually something they don't tell you is when I had friends who tried to refer to me and they worked at Pacific, they were literally said, "You have to write a page essay why you aren't using our in-house endodontist," which is ridiculous. Obviously, there's some cons with that. They'll push you to trade quantity for quality. Your income can be very variable. A lot of times they'll get you right at the beginning and send you a ton of patients, and then it dies off. You're going to have to work at multiple offices. You're not going to be using a microscope at most of these. It's not fun. And you're not going to be able to get referrals outside of the corporate dentistry, because people in private practice don't want to send to someone who's in corporate. Associate, this is kind of what I think a lot of you will step into as you get out of that. The benefits here are going to be mentorship. You're going to have a built-in team. Sometimes you can transition to an owner. I have friends who have done that, and depending on the owner, you can get some tax benefits. The con is, what if you don't like that? What if you don't like the referrals? What if you don't like the office? What if you don't like the team? And then you will obviously make less, but you can sometimes get options to move it. And then finally, buying an existing practice. So pros with that are you going to have a built-in income because you buy the AR. So checks are going to be coming in. This is a big difference between buying an existing practice and startup. You have a built-in staff, which sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. Generally, banks are going to be more friendly loaning to you because they've seen that the business has a track record of making X number of dollars. So I'll show it in a second, but the rough valuation for Endo is right around 60% of the average last 2 years income. And that's what you have to pay for it. So if it's $1 million, you pay $600,000 for it. But the bank has seen that the practice can make $1 million, and so they know it's going to be able to repay back their loan. Sometimes you can get real estate out of that, which is pretty cool. And then we'll talk about credit cards here in a second. As far as your cons, sometimes you don't like the staff, referral base. The big one is the office. If you have an office that's very old and isn't well set up, you're still going to have to do remodels. The guy that I work for in Carson City, he bought a very old practice and he did one room and it's remodeled and it's great and everything's ergonomic, and the second room is a nightmare to work out of. But he's so busy now, he only has 2 rooms, so he can't afford to shut down a room for 2 months to remodel it, so you're kind of stuck in there. It's also going to be more expensive than starting your own practice because you're buying far more than just the supplies. You're also buying the AR and the existing staff and all that other things too. And you do have to be careful with real estate. So my one buddy who is a general dentist, he bought a practice down in the South Bay, and the general dentist who sold it to him kept the real estate, and his rent was like $15,000 a month. So that's a big hit as well. So you don't know who the landlord sometimes is good, but most of the time they're not. So quick sidebar on credit cards. If you guys know all this, please stop me. I didn't know anything about credit cards besides just you need to have one and establish credit, but there's a lot of cool perks. I recommend this guy. It's called the Points Guy. He has a ton of great articles that talk about which benefits and which credit card you want to have. In general, there's 3 types. You have travel cards, you're gonna have airline specific or hotel specific or retail specific, and then cashback cards. So really, if you take one thing away from this, do not use a debit card. There's really main 2 reasons. Are number 1 is there are no purchase and fraud protection. If someone steals your debit card and uses it to buy stuff, you don't get any of that money back. If they do it with your credit card, there are actually federal laws saying you can't, they have to pay you back, and kind of you don't get charged for that. You don't get any rewards for purchases with debit cards. Sometimes they're free, sometimes it's not. The big difference is you need to build credit, because if you're going to be buying things, they all look at credit, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then it's based off of a limit. I think everybody knows that. So credit scores are based off of these 4 things. For most of you, this is going to be a big problem, is the amount of debt. This is why it was hard for me, because I had student loans. That is a huge issue, because your debt to income ratio is going to be inverted. The ones you can control, though, is length of credit history. I think most of you have credit cards at this point, so that helps. Every time you open a new credit, that could be house, car, credit cards, that drops you down a little bit. The mix of how much you have as far as what type of, do you have credit cards, do you have installment accounts like loans, and then payment history. So always pay on time. But this makes a huge difference. If you have $1 million loan and you're 30-year fixed, the difference here, if you're up at the highest level versus if you drop down to the 600s, you'll pay an extra $380,000 over the life of that loan. So this is how you get the good rates. As far as the rules, this is more fun with the animations, but do not carry a balance. That's the number 1 thing. Pay for as many things as you can afford with it. Don't use cash. Don't use a debit card. It's usually worth it to get a card with a fee, and make sure you start building your credit card or your credit now. As far as the business ones, these are going to be your 2 main ones that everyone uses. So it's either the American Express or the Chase Sapphire Reserve. If you guys want to talk more about it, I have the Amex Business. As far as your airline specific ones, kind of look at whoever is the biggest airline in your area, and I would recommend getting those as well. Southwest is ours. So if you're going to summarize it, if you don't know what you're doing and you just want to get a beginner credit card, Sapphire Preferred, it's I think $100, but you get so many benefits, it's worth it. That's what I would recommend. So let's talk about Endo. So how do we actually evaluate a practice? Like I said, average 2 to the last 3 years of gross collections, and then it's a variable of about 60 to 65% based on technology. So do you have a cone beam? Do you have gentle wave? You can be higher at 65. If you don't have anything, it's lower at 60. So for example, we're going to use my numbers. So I was at about 1.4 million in collections, and I have a lot of the fun toys, so we say it's 65%. So I could probably sell my practice right now for $910,000. Okay, so that's how that works. how do these guys do it? Because this is where it gets really fun. So there's something called EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It is a tool that accountants use to figure out how profitable a business can be. And when you look at that, you then take your net income plus any taxes you paid, plus any expense on interest, and then anything you've depreciated or amortized over, which means that if you buy a big, like a cone beam, you don't usually take the whole, $100,000 at once. You usually have to spread it out over a few years. Okay, so then you have a multiplier. So my buddy in Florida just got 7.5 for his endo practice. My EBITDA was right on 800,000. So if I wanted to sell to one of the corporate places, I would probably get between $5 and $6 million. Now, there are a lot of stipulations attached to that, but this is why it's becoming harder to buy an existing practice, is because banks aren't lending. It's hard for students to get that loans anyway. And it's much easier for them to say, you know what, I'm going to be done in 5 years. I'll take a $5 million payout right now. That sounds great. So that's why you're going to see the number of practices available for sale is dropping. So that's why I opened my own practice. So how do we do that? Benefits here, you can make it whatever the heck you want. You want 5 rooms, you want 2 rooms, you want 1 room, you can do whatever you want. You really have that blank slate to go off of, which is great. Sometimes you can get the real estate as well, which is always beneficial, especially from tax purposes. You're able to capture new markets, and that's what I did, and I'll show you how I did that in a second. The con, you don't have staff, you don't have patients, you don't have a loan, you don't have any money coming in, and what are you going to do while it's being built? So we'll talk about all that. So how on earth do you get paid? Do you guys know how we get paid as owners? Are you familiar with this? Does anyone here know accounting and CPA stuff? Okay, we're going to give you kind of a talk of how we get paid. So, in general, here's what your salary is going to be for each of these. So, most of the Army people are getting paid right around that 125. Depending on which school you're at as an educator, you can actually get up to 300, 400,000 if you're the director. So you can actually make a fair amount in education, but it's going to take you 20 years to get to that level. Corporate, anywhere from about 40 to 50%. Associate, it's going to be 40 to 50%. And owner, you're generally going to be making 60 to 70% of what you produce. So if you charge $1,000 for the root canal, you're going to make 600 to 700 as an owner, and probably 400 to 500 as a associate. Okay. So how do taxes work? You're going to have income tax, you have state tax if you have it, you have local tax, and then you want to think of your income in a pre-tax and post-tax environment. So let's say you make $500,000. We're making it easy. How we work in the United States is we have a federal bracket that is progressive. That means from 0 to 11,000, it's 10%, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at it, some of the money that you made, if you made $500,000, was taxed at 35%. Some was taxed at 10. And so if all you did is say, hey, I made $500,000, and what are my taxes? You're going to pay about $146,000 in taxes, which gives you an average tax rate of about 29.4%. So when you go to file your taxes, there's now something called, oops, I have to go down, sorry. Deductions. So the standard deduction, if you're unmarried, is $12,950. And what that says is the government says, okay, you made $500,000. We're going to take off that $13,000, and now you made $487,000. And your savings now is the $4,500. So your tax rate has dropped. Okay. Everybody has the standard deduction. You guys as residents have this now for the small amount of money that you guys get. Okay. Then you can do a 401k. So the maximum for that is $22,500 that you can take off pre-tax. And so now the government thinks instead of making $500,000, you made $464,000. New taxes go down, tax rate goes down even farther. Okay. There are other taxes you have to pay. There's something called FICA, which is the payroll tax. How that works is the owner pays 7.65, the employee pays 6.5. So if Jenny gets $1,000 for her paycheck, I actually have to pay out $1,076.50, and she gets $923.50. Okay, so both of us pay it. If you own the business, you have to pay both of those. So it's about 15% tax right there. You have your Medicare surplus on anything over $200,000. State tax varies. Highest is California. Local income taxes varies. Highest is New York City. And school district taxes varies as well. So how do you do it as an owner? What you have is what's called a base salary, and then you take draws. So let's say your base salary is you're going to make $8,000 a month, and so that's $96,000 a year, and you pay $16,000 in income tax, just federal. And I'm assuming you guys need CPAs once you get out. That's the first thing I'm going to tell you. Number two, this is just for the income at the federal level. With the owner, you can actually take more for your 401k, so you can take $66,000 this year pre-tax for investments. And then there are deductions, and that's where it gets really fun. So these are just a small amount of things that you can deduct. If you have your home interest, practice loan, you can depreciate equipment, you can depreciate the vehicle use, if you take dentist out, if you travel, if you do CE. For example, flying to Chicago, the business paid for all of that. Licenses, you can rent out your own house, that's the Augusta rule, and then there's also charitable giving that you can do as well. So there's a ton of stuff you can do. So let's look at the two different ones. So if you have an owner versus a W-2. So this is the W-2 employee, this is you as an associate. You can take, you have your $500,000, you take off the taxes and the 401k, and you end up with $343,000 of post-tax income. That means it's passed through everything and now it's in your bank. Then I used kind of some rough numbers. Let's say you have a house, so you got $10,000 on that. You have your dues, subscriptions, travel and CE, meals, entertainment, and your vehicle. And these are actually pulled off of my tax. So this gives you a rough idea of what you're going to be paying as an owner for these certain different things. This was pulled off of my numbers for last year. So you end up with about $265,000 to play with after at a 27% tax rate. As the owner, you can depreciate a lot. You can actually deduct most of that. So the interest, the dues, the travel, the meals, the vehicle, all of that can actually be deducted as business expenses. So now, when it looks at that, you make $500,000, you take off your 96 that you've had for salary, and then you're at 404. You can then deduct $201,000 off of that, which means that if you add on your salary plus the money left over, now to the federal government, it looks like you only made $300,000 instead of $5. So now you've only paid $76,000, which is a 15% tax rate, which gives you a savings of almost $58,000. This is how billionaires don't pay taxes, is because they own multiple businesses and they're able to run everything through it. Any questions about this? I know that I went through that fast. I know we're almost out of time. I think that's the last. I'll stop that. Oh, finally, real fast. How to pay less taxes as a W-2. If you're an independent contractor, which depending on the state, you can actually just run it as and create your own little S Corp or LLC. And then as an associate, what you can do is have the doctor pay for things such as the AAE or travel, and then take it out from your pre-tax income. So if your AAE membership is $2,000 with a meeting, what you would do is have the owner pay it and then take it out from your base pay before taxes. Does that make sense?
So you give yourself a $96,000 salary.
I'm up to 200 now, but yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Because you have to give yourself like a reasonable salary, right?
Yep. Yeah. So that's why I was just doing it for we're a little over $1 million, and so I did half of what I do. So yeah.
Okay,
cool. All right. So I think that's probably a good pausing point. I know I haven't gotten to any of the how to do it, but one final thing. All of this is going to change in 2025. The Trump tax cuts that came through in 2018, all of this goes away in 2025. So corporate tax is still set for life, but it all goes back to where it was before. How it was before, there was actually more benefits for W-2s. You could take non-reimbursed business expenses and get paid back. You could get mileage back. There was a few more things. So before this came into effect, I was able to actually deduct more as a W-2. So wait a couple of years and we'll see what they end up doing. So you may be able to get back to doing that. However, it's taxes are fun. There's a lot of games with it. You want to find a good CPA who's going to stay within the law and give you the ability to save a lot of money. So, all right, we will come in next time and talk about pretty much, most importantly, how the hell do you set up a practice. So I will see you guys next time. Do you have any questions about what we talked about?
Not as of right now. We'll get back to you if we come up with anything, though.
All right, text me.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye, guys.
All right, see you later.